Hey Waffle Gang, I do hope you're well. My name is Mark and today we're checking out some more relationship stories, and if you do love a Reddit story, why not consider hitting that like, subscribe, maybe that notification bell too. Well, let's crack on with today's first story, which comes from the Off My Chest subreddit. Before we do get into the story, I just want to give you a warning that it is one that we have covered in the past, but now has some new updates and information on it as well. So if you do want to skip parts of the story, as always, timestamps are down in the description and along the timeline below. Thank you. From the Off My Chest subreddit from Equivalent Ladder 197 and says, "My brother proposed to my fiancée, his ex, and I'm pissed. My 28 male brother, Mark, 26 male, I know, not Mark again, used to date my fiancée, Jen, 26 female, a year ago. For context, they dated back in August 2022. They were only together for a month before he broke things off with her because he was bored of being in a relationship and never really wanted to settle down anyway. At the time they were dating, I was in a different state, so I had no idea he even had a girlfriend, and I had no idea who Jen was until I met her. Jen and I met in a bar when I moved back in October and hit it off really well. She was easily the most beautiful and intelligent woman I had ever met. We met up a few times more before we made it official. Fast forward to December, and I finally bring her up to my family and propose them meeting her at Christmas. They knew I was in a relationship, but I'm not the most open about my personal life, so I kept details about her to a minimum, until I knew how serious we really were. My parents asked to see pictures and they started passing my phone around the dinner table. Mark saw it and blew up, calling me a shit brother for dating his ex-girlfriend and demanded I break it off with her. I refused. When I asked Jen about it, she confirmed they had dated and gave me the details about their breakup. It took a few weeks, but eventually Mark stopped bringing up me dating his ex and I thought he was over it. On Jen's birthday this year, I took her out to a fancy dinner with both our families and her closest friends, and I asked her to marry me. Mark flipped once again and blew up about me proposing to her, which I and my sisters immediately shut down. The incident happened this past weekend. Mark had been pretty quiet about the whole thing for the last 2 months. I didn't see him much and figured he went low contact with me, which I had no problem with. Then he invited me and Jen for a family dinner at his apartment with my parents and sisters. I thought it was weird, but my parents and sisters were also going, so we agreed to go. The dinner was nice, nothing too fancy, and we moved to the living room to talk. About 30 minutes into normal conversation, Mark stood up and told us he had an announcement. He made a long speech about being happy to have his family around for his big moment, then got on one knee and pulled out this cheap ring while asking Jen to marry him. Jen was confused and obviously uncomfortable and demanded that he put it away and stand up. My dad tried to make a grab for Mark, but I got him first and punched him. I won't repeat most of it, mostly because I was too angry to even listen to most of it. But he said something along the lines of wanting to show me that Jen wasn't really into me and just wanted to get back at him. Before it could get any worse, my parents rushed me out and promised to talk to him. It's been a few days since it happened and I'm still pissed off. I don't know what to do at this point. I'm scared Jen might have second thoughts marrying me because of this. Any advice? Later that day, Opie edits the post and says, "First, thanks for reading and responding. I've been reading the comments between last night and this morning and valid points were made. This isn't an update since the only people I've spoken to since dinner is Jen and my little sister. I want to clarify a few things that I saw in the comments. 1. Jen and I are newly engaged. It was one of those feelings where we both knew we're in it for the long run. As fast as it is, I'm sure about her. 2. When we met, I was the one who approached her, not the other way around. Whether she knew or had suspicions of us being related, I don't know. I asked after finding out they dated and she says she had no idea. I didn't have a reason to doubt that, but I can admit this seemingly overreaction on Mark's part does raise red flags. 3. I had no idea she and Mark dated when I met her. Mark and I aren't close at all. We used to be, but as we grew up we drifted and talked less and less. Before I moved back, we didn't really speak much aside from special days like his or my birthday. Jen knew of my family, but not much until I decided I was ready to introduce them to her. When she and Mark met again, I didn't get a sense of any residual feelings on either part. She didn't treat him like a stranger, but she also wasn't overly affectionate with him either. 4. I was told this was a relationship that lasted a month. I didn't think I needed permission from Mark to ask her to marry me, but maybe that was wrong of me. I'm not sure. That being said, I plan to talk to Mark this weekend to lay everything out on the table and figure out what's up. I never asked for his side of their relationship, which is my fault for not doing my due diligence. If anything major or enlightening happens, I'll update, but for now, that's all I have. So in the comments, people were talking about don't give in to like the he's family's kind of comments from your family, and Opie says, thankfully I haven't heard the he's family shit much aside from my mum and a few aunts. They knew me well enough to know our relationship isn't enough for me to put up with this disrespect, especially towards my fiancé. They'd be wasting their breath. And then on the fiancé, Opie says, yeah, I don't think I have to worry about her going back. Safe to say she can't stand him either, lol. So 2 days after that original post, Opie comes in with, first I want to thank everyone for reading. It's been a busy weekend, so I haven't had the chance to reply to many people. But I did edit in responses to the most common questions I saw in the comments of the original post. Again, thank you. I appreciate it all, even the criticisms. Now for the update. I called Mark and asked him to meet up with me at my place to talk. I told him I would prefer Jen to be around for the talk as well, but I was cool with it if he didn't want her there. He agreed to talk to both of us and showed up at my place around noon today. It was pretty quiet for a few minutes before I started the conversation. I apologized for not warning him I'd be proposing to Jen, and I apologized for hitting him. He said it was whatever, but he appreciated the apology. I told him what Jen had said about the relationship and breakup when I asked her about it, and I asked him to confirm if it was true. I pretty much said that his reaction throughout this whole thing has been extreme, and I wanted to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding their relationship or downplaying how serious they were. He confirmed that they only dated for a few weeks, and he broke up with her because he lost interest. Jen asked him if he was acting like this because he still had feelings or regrets about ending things with her. He said he could admit he thought she was more attractive than when he last saw her, but there weren't any feelings or regrets. He said he just didn't like seeing a girl he dated, even if it was short term, with his older brother, and as a man, I shouldn't have violated him by pursuing things with his ex. I reminded him that I had no idea they dated, so it wasn't like I consciously did this knowing their history together. He shrugged me off and said it didn't matter. I still should have broken it off. He was adamant that if the roles were reversed, he would have done the same thing, which I doubt. I asked him why he proposed to her if he didn't have any lingering feelings. Basically, to sum it up, he was talking about it to one of his buddies who was around when Mark and Jen dated, and the guy put the idea in his head that maybe Jen knew from the start that we were related and was doing this to get back at him, considering Jen had been hung up on him after they ended. He and his friend thought it would be a good idea to test it and see if they were right. So he came up with the idea to propose and see if she dumped me for him. Jen asked him to elaborate on why he thought she was hung up on him. He told her that he heard she was asking about him following the breakup and still hanging out at places they used to go to, so it was a valid assumption. Then for her to pop up randomly with his brother affirmed his suspicions. Jen told him she only asked about him once following the breakup and she'd been hanging out at those places with friends before they started dating, and she wouldn't avoid them because of a breakup. She also told him she was offended at the idea that she would go as low as to pursue me, just to get back at him. He shrugged and gave her a half-assed apology, but she had to see it from his point of view. He asked her if she really didn't know, and she told him that she didn't see the resemblance in us until we're in the same room, and we act nothing alike, so it never crossed her mind, and he said okay. That pretty much wrapped up the conversation. He did tell me before he left that I could take back his invite to the wedding because he can't bring himself to support our relationship knowing he used to date her. I told him he didn't have to worry about that as he was most likely going to be uninvited anyway. It's been a few hours since our talk and I do feel better. My parents aren't too happy about him being uninvited, but they understood that it was a mutual decision and probably for the best. My sisters told me they knew he didn't have a good reason for being an arsehole, and they don't blame me for not wanting him at the wedding. As of now, I'm going to limit contact with Mark, and I doubt he'll reach out to me anytime soon either. Once again, I want to thank everyone for reading and commenting, and if anything significant happens, I'll update again. Someone says in the comments below that one saying, why didn't she know of your family? Opie says we hadn't discussed my family much in the beginning of our relationship. I left home to get away from them. my parents specifically, and started reconciling at my sister's request when I decided to move back home. I was open about not being close with them when Jen asked, and she was okay with being left in the dark considering the circumstances. Around 2 months later, OP comes in again and says, I couldn't post this to the same forum, so I'm posting this directly to my profile in case anyone is interested in an update. It's been a while since I've posted, but a few things have happened since my last talk with Mark. So I've been low contact with Mark since our last conversation. I haven't called him and he hasn't called me. And our only interactions have been in family settings. As it stands, my mum is now upset that Mark is still uninvited from my wedding. It started with a comment made during my younger sister, Sophie, 22 female's birthday. Her boyfriend of, I think, 4 years proposed to her at the end of the night, and we sat around talking about what she envisioned for her dream wedding. She talked a bit about wanting a destination wedding and her ideas for the cake and dress. Then she said something along the lines of, Teddy, I know Mark's banned from your wedding, but you won't care if he comes to mine, right? I laughed it off and told her I can't get mad about her guest list, even if I wanted to. My mum gave me this weird look and asked if Mark was still not invited to my wedding. I told her yes, and she got irritated. She told me she thought I was joking and said I was being unreasonable to go through with banning him from the wedding since he's family. She accused me of holding a grudge just to be petty. I reminded her that he and I agreed on him not coming. I then told her that this wasn't the time to talk about my wedding since the day was about Sophie. And if Mark or her want to talk about my wedding, they can call me another time. Sophie laid into my mum a bit about trying to make her special day about Mark, and my mum dropped the issue. For those of you who might be wondering, Mark wasn't at Sophie's party because he apparently had to work and couldn't make it. A few days later, my mum stopped by my house and said she wanted to discuss my wedding. She asked me why I was so adamant about Mark not coming to my wedding. She said that I shouldn't be so insecure about Mark and Jen's previous relationship and that uninviting him was a step too far. I told her that Mark and I mutually agreed on him not coming to the wedding and he can come to me about it himself if he has a problem with it. We got into an argument and she said that if I wasn't going to re-invite Mark, then she would not be coming either because I'm ostracizing her son. I shrugged and told her if that's what she wants, then she can toss her invite in the trash because I won't beg her to be there. She asked me if I would really be okay with her not attending. I told her it wouldn't be the first time she missed an event of mine because of Mark. She said I was being an arsehole for throwing her past mistakes in her face and she stormed out. I then started getting messages and phone calls from her and a few family members about the whole situation, saying I was in the wrong and urging me to invite Mark just to keep the peace. Jen's also been getting messages from my mum asking her to talk to me and get me to change my mind, but to my knowledge, she hasn't been responding. So far, most of my mum's side of the family are standing in solidarity with her, not attending, while my dad and his side of the family, which is only my aunt and uncle and their 2 kids, agree with me and are still coming. My sisters are also still coming to the wedding, and of course Jen's family too. Also, I tried to talk to Mark about it and asked him if he had a problem with not having an invite. He said he uninvited himself in the first place, and he doesn't get why they're making a big deal because he still doesn't want to go. He told me to leave him out of the fighting because he's not involved, and he says he'd tell her the same. As of now, I'm back to being in low contact with my mum, but my dad and I are still on decent terms. I'm still deciding on whether I'll re-invite my mum and her family, should they change their mind about the boycott. But the chances are low, and I told my dad this too, which he understands. For now, Jen and I started looking into downsizing the venue since the guest list is significantly smaller. Update 3. My mum is uninvited from the wedding indefinitely. About 2 weeks after she decided not to come to the wedding, she came and stopped by and said she wanted to clear the air and talk about everything. We agreed and invited her to join us for dinner. Jen made her a plate of food and I asked her if she was still planning on not coming to the wedding. She said that while she wants to, she can't get over me not inviting Mark because of a simple mistake. I reminded her that his simple mistake was proposing to my fiancé with me sitting less than 3 feet away from him, and she said it was just a joke. Jen asked her why she wanted to talk, if she was maintaining the same stance on Mark coming to the wedding. She said she wanted to talk to Jen and she was hoping Jen would hear her out and talk me into inviting Mark again. She apparently assumed I was at work and she'd be able to catch her alone. Jen politely told her that she understood her thought process, but she wouldn't have had that conversation anyway without me present, since this is about my brother. My mum made a comment somewhere in the lines of Jen being spineless and unable to have a conversation without me thinking for her, which started a pretty heated back and forth between the three of us before Jen told her to get out. She got up and started walking towards the door, and my mum followed her, still screaming at her. By this point, she's yelling about her tearing our family apart. While Jen was unlocking the front door, my mum grabbed her hair and pulled her to the ground, still screaming. She hit her and tried to claw her face. I dragged her off her and threw her outside. She banged on the door for a few minutes while I made sure Jen was okay before she left and called to both of us repeatedly. When I was sure Jen was okay, I texted my mum and told her to not bother reaching out again because we'd never speak to her again. I called my dad and sisters and told them what happened too. My dad was surprised and tried to make excuses, saying she'd been stressed about this whole situation for a while. My sisters say they knew she'd snap eventually, since she's always been a crazy bee, and they said they'd come make sure Jen is okay. I asked Jen if she wanted to press charges, but she declined and said she only wanted to cut contact with her for good. I told her that part was obvious, but she should still talk to the police since she was physically assaulted, but she doesn't want my mum to get arrested. My sisters and Jen's mum came by to comfort her, thankfully, so she's doing okay. My mum is blocked on everything until Jen says otherwise. I genuinely don't know what to do now. Jen doesn't want to go to the police because she'd feel guilty having her arrested over this, but my sisters and I want to convince her to, and I'd at least want documentation in case something happens in the future. Someone in the comments below that one tells OP to press charges, and OP says, I believe I can, but my fear is 1. Upsetting Jen for going against her wishes, even if for her own good, and 2. The police not taking it seriously because the one affected, Jen, isn't even interested in pursuing anything. I'm likely going to just have it documented because unfortunately, my mum is the type of person to get significantly worse before she gets slightly better. Someone says all of this could have been avoided if Mark had sat down with your mum and taken responsibility. OP says he absolutely could, but I don't think he knows what accountability means. I really do believe he thinks he has nothing to do with our mum's actions. I don't think anything I say will be enough to convince him that everything she does is for him and her own selfish gain. Someone insists that that she should really be pressing charges, and OP says Jen is still against formal charges, but after reading some of your comments with me and a long talk about how this could escalate, she agreed to have it documented with the police just in case. She wants to talk to my dad about the possibility of getting her back in therapy or some kind of treatment for erratic behavior. And of course, we are moving forward with going no contact. Another post OP adds that says some background on my relationship with my parents. Some people were asking questions about my mum and my decision not to be open with Jen about my relationship with my parents. I figure I could give some background on why we're so strained. Like some of you said, Mark was the golden child. Mark was my mum's baby boy, and she didn't do much to try and hide it. They didn't spend much time with my sisters and I like normal parents did with their kids unless they had to. But they'd spend time with Mark as often as possible, like taking him out shopping while we stayed with the sitter, or bringing him home his favourite food and toys from the store when they'd shop alone. He usually got better things compared to the rest of us, like new expensive clothes, while ours were all thrifted, or new toys just for him compared to old toys we had to share with each other. If my sisters and I got gifts, they were for us to share, but my mum made it pretty clear that Mark's things were only for him, and we shouldn't touch it. When Mark would screw up, I'd get punished for not being a good role model and showing him the proper way to behave. For example, Mark went through a phase of breaking his toys and I got the beating because obviously he learned that behavior from me. When he was 8, Mark got in trouble at school for trying to push a kid down the stairs. I was grounded for 2 weeks and told to apologize to the kid for not teaching my brother right. When I turned 13, I pushed my parents to start giving me an allowance. They agreed as long as I did household chores like mowing the lawn, taking out the trash, raking leaves, etc. It was usually somewhere around $25 a week to help me start saving. Mark saw that I was getting money and he begged my parents for an allowance too. Instead of making him work, $10 of my allowance money was given to him each week because we were doing such a good job with our chores that he never touched. Whenever I asked him to help, he'd tell me it's not his job to do chores, so why should he bother? It was around this time that I started really distancing myself from my brother. By the time I entered high school, we only talked to each other when we needed small favors or when we absolutely had to. I got my first job when I turned 17 because I wanted to finally get my own car and make money that they couldn't force me to give to Mark. My older sister Maggie helped me start my own bank account and showed me how to properly budget and save my money. I got my first car at 18 after all of my hard work. When Mark got his license, my parents asked me to let him use my car to get around and for extra practice behind the wheel. Reluctantly, I agreed, and for a while the arrangement was fine. Mark used my car when I didn't need it and helped maintain it pretty well. When he expressed wanting my parents to buy him his own car, my mum came to me and told me to give him my car because he needed it more. When I refused, she threatened to kick me out. We got into a fight that night which ended with her giving Mark my car and taking me to transfer ownership of it to him within the following few days. Since I didn't have anywhere else I could go at the time, I just sucked it up and signed it over. When I graduated high school, both of my parents skipped my graduation because Mark didn't want to sit in a long ceremony just to see me get a piece of paper, and my mum didn't want to leave him alone for the night. So I only had the support of my sisters and my aunt and uncle who wanted to take me out. They ended up having to bring me home at my parents' request because they made me dinner to make it up to me. It was a dinner I couldn't eat because my mum put shrimp and chicken on the same serving dish, and I'm allergic to shellfish. My first year out of high school, I worked 2 jobs to buy myself another car, and at the start of the new school year I moved away for college and cut contact with them. They, mostly my mum, tried to reach out for the first few months via social media, and Sophie, but I never responded, and I told Sophie she'd be cut off too if she kept trying. When she couldn't get to me through Sophie, she tried going through my older sister Charlotte, and a few times through Maggie and Mark until I threatened to file a restraining order for harassment. It was a bluff because I had no idea how to do it, but it managed to scare her off, and the most I got from her was a happy holiday text over the years. Around the time I moved back, Charlotte told me that they'd been seeing a family therapist at Charlotte's request. My parents wanted to apologize for their treatment of us. I was hesitant, but I agreed as long as they would be genuine, and the reconciliation process started when I moved back home. That doesn't even scratch the surface of everything they put me through, and it took a lot for me to even begin to let them back into my life. When I met Jen, I wasn't sure where my relationship with her was going or where my relationship with my parents was going. I didn't want to mention my family at all, mostly because I was ready to cut contact again if I needed to. Jen was understanding of it being a sore subject and didn't press for it more. I hope this helps shed some light on some of the questions I've been seeing popping up, which someone questions about why didn't the reconciliation depend on them reimbursing him for the car. And Opie says, getting reimbursement for the car wasn't a hill I was willing to die on since the damage was already done. Even now, it's hard to believe Mark was the favourite. There wasn't anything really special about him. I don't mean that as an insult either, he was just a regular kid. My parents weren't having fertility issues, he wasn't a miracle, wasn't a meal ticket. They weren't having marital problems and using a baby as a band-aid. He was just born and they decided to love him more than us. And believe me, they didn't think this was normal. They just have a soft spot for our parents because they're our parents, and they believe they have redeeming qualities. Mate, that is just so incredibly messed up. We see it far too often about this whole golden child thing and how the rest of the family is sort of cast aside for them. And absolutely no contact with the mother is the right way to go. Her behavior seems to just escalate, and it sounds like it will only get worse. And with that behavior, there's no way you'd want any of them at your wedding. I mean, the brother himself, although he already says he doesn't want to go to the wedding, he's willing to propose to your fiance in front of your family like that's any way normal behavior whatsoever. Your mum at your house pulling your fiance's hair, they just sound like absolute nightmares. The father isn't doing nothing as well. And with all the background family information, yeah, just fucking cut them off, man. I have a friend with a very, very similar situation to this. Not exactly similar because that's wild, isn't it? But he's got 3 brothers, and one of his brothers, I think is the middle brother or something, is treated as the golden child. But he's also, from what I've heard, he also seems to be a bit of a troublemaker at the same time and always doing crazy shit to the family, like stealing and stuff, but still can't do no wrong in the parents' eyes. And the brothers have to sort of help him through things at the same time, and they get the blame if the middle brother messes up. Maybe I'll get him to tell his story one day. I'm sure he wouldn't mind. He always expresses it to us and always shares it amongst friends and things like that. But now I'm going to turn this one to you guys. What do you guys make of this situation? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. And just a huge thank you for being here. And I will see you in the next one. Take care and much love.